Are you bored at home and ready to learn how to give your horse a pedicure? Just kidding. You leave that part to the professionals, but if you're ready to learn about all their fancy tools and stuff, you've come to the right place. Hi, I'm Lauren Power. I'm 17 years old and I go to Skagit Valley College. I'm a part of the Trailblazers 4-H Club and this is my 10th year in 4-H. This thing right here, the Farrier box, most important tool out of all of these things because it's what keeps you organized, keeps your farrier organized. It's where all these things sit. Now, if you're under a horse and you're struggling to find your tools, they're not going to wait for you for that long. So this thing keeps them all together and makes them super easy to find. Hoof pick, pretty fancy thing. You use it to get everything out of the hoof that shouldn't be there, all the disgusting debris. A hoof knife has this little blade on the end, which is used to pry excess frog off and sole and other debris, and it also allows healthy material to come to the surface and breathe and become healthy again. Nippers, they are a giant pair of nail clippers. They're used along the horse's hoof wall to cut it down to the right length to begin, your trim or your shoe or anything else in between. Rasp. This thing is a giant nail file. It has two sides, however. It has a pretty thick, aggressive side, which is used in the beginning of rasping, which just moves a lot of material at once. The center side, it has a little more finer purposes, as rounding the hoof to the shoe or making it level on the finer level. A farrier commonly has two though. One is used for the main hoof, which is, when you're first starting and you're really just getting off the material and everything. And another one is usually for more finer purposes, because your fine one, you don't want to get all dirty and nasty and a bunch of hard work. It needs just little stuff. Clench cutters. These are a little hatchet thing. They have two purposes though. First purpose is after you have clenched the nail, you can take it down and cut off any excess nail that is still there. Or you can use it after when you want to pull off a nail, you put it underneath the clench, you tap it with a hammer, and it loosens the clench. Nail pullers. Never leave your house without nail pullers. If you have a loose nail, a loose hoof, a loose shoe at all, these things, you can grab the nail and individually pull each nail out. Now, the reason you want to do that is because if you just pull the shoe off, you're going to destroy the hoof wall. Nail pullers make it a little bit easier. Nail clippers are just like nippers, but they're used for the nails. After you have driven them through the wall, you cut them off using these. Shoe pullers, exactly what their name says. You use them, you literally put them on the shoe and you pull the shoe off. But they are used after nail pullers. Hoof testers, these are a medieval contraption, I swear. You use them to put on the sole, on the heel, on any part of the hoof that you squeeze down, and it tests the hoof if it's sore or not. So if your horse reacts when you use these, it means they're sore there. But if they're not, you're fine. Hoof gauge. Hoof gauge has some pretty good uses. You lay the hoof flat here and take this part and create it even with the top of the hoof. On the end here, it has numbers which correspond to angles. Now, your front feet should be between 50 to 55 degrees. Your back feet, however, are between 55 to 57. Those are the averages that a horse should be. Although, depending on the conformation and whatever corrections that the horse needs, it can be different. Now you have a steel keg shoe. This is straight out of the factory. It is plain stamped and there's no modifications at all. So there is no fancy bells or whistles or anything. The cons to this type of shoe though is that they're really heavy and they kind of take away from a natural movement of a horse. But their pros is that they're the easiest to modify to any horse foot, really. Now, your aluminum shoe is extremely lightweight and allows your horse to move more freely, which is why it's usually a top pick for a lot of people. Although it's not malleable like at all, so it's not the best. Shoe tongs, pretty cool. You take your malleable shoe, grab it with your tong, and then put it in the forge. Now this allows you to keep a safe distance from the forge without getting burnt. Once your shoe is hot enough to where it's malleable, you would take your rounding hammer and set it on your anvil or wherever you're shaping it at, and that's how you hit it, and these are the tools that you use to shape the shoe to the foot. Flat tires. That's just what my family calls them, but they're actually called nails. These things, they're pretty cool. They come in different sizes because this is not going to be fitting through a draft horse's hoof at all. You're going to need a couple more inches on that. But what is really, really fascinating about these things is that they come in different types of metals. So if you get a copper nail, you get it all dirty on accident, and you put it through your horse's hoof, and you get that dirt up in there, that's generally going to be causing an abscess, which is not something you want to deal with at all. But because copper is antimicrobial, you're not going to be getting that. So, very useful. This thing doesn't work without this thing, because you take your nail and your hammer, and then you take your shoe, and there's little holes along the lining of the shoe that you put your nail into, and your hammer is what gets it through. And you know, your nail doesn't mean anything without your hammer, and your hammer doesn't mean anything without your nail. And of course, it doesn't mean anything without your horse. This thing is pretty important. You take it, you put it under the nail, and you tap the nail from inside of the shoe, and it allows the shoe to start to create a bend, which is important because after you use that, you have to use clenchers. Now clenchers grab onto the nails because they're pointed downwards. So they grab onto the nail and they clench it downwards, which is really important because a nail is driven up and you have to clench it down, which creates the pressure and the hold of the shoe onto the hoof. These things, this is a hoof stand and a hoof cradle. Now a stand is generally used when you put the hoof as this. It's used for top dressing, it's used for clenching, anything on top of the hoof pretty much. The cradle, anything underneath. So it's used possibly for, taking your hoof pick, cleaning it out. Taking your hoof knife, scraping it out, You could use it to rasp, you could use it to cut, just anything in general for your undercare. That's where you use this. All of this information was collected by JME Farrier Service along with the tools. Do you have any questions?
Yeah. What would you consider is the hardest tool to use?
The hardest tool to use when showing a horse, I would have to say, is the rasp. This thing, it is heavy alone by itself, and because you have to flow against the grain of the rasp to move any material, it takes a lot of arm strength. And I have tried it before and it has not gone very well because this takes a lot of arm strength that I do not have. And I give big props to my Farrier for being able to do it. Anything else?
What would you say the average cost of the tools are?
The average cost of a tool really depends on what brand you're using, what type of metal you want, the size, but generally they all fall anywhere between $90 to $150.
Okay, thank you.
You.